Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, one and all. I am Dr. Hatem Mohammed from Yemen, Sana University. I'd like to first thank Dr. Ratnakar for the invitation. It's my pleasure to deliver a talk in this conference, and my talk's title is Human Rights, a critical study of colonization and decolonization in the Middle East context. While trying to write something on human rights, there were many questions crossed my mind and really need to be examined and answered. That's to say, my paper is a critical study of the term human rights, the way it is created, and how it is interpreted and imposed. The paper examines the legacy of colonization and deciphers the relationship between the colonizer and the human rights that he creates, and the impacts of human rights on the colonized. The study employs the post-colonial theory to investigate what is called the end of colonization. Taking the Middle East as a scope of my study, the paper carries an assumption that the Middle East reflects the real culmination of colonization that appears in a new form. The colonizer disguises in the name of human organizations that search for any excuse to subjugate the colonized to their colonial policies. The paper raises some questions and tries to answer them to bring the logical meaning of human rights, which become the colonial ironing staff to extinguish and put down the aspirations and dreams of the colonized. The paper attempts to answer them philosophically and bringing the Middle East as an evidence of what is happening. So the question, what does a human right means to individuals, to groups, or to communities? And who grants it and to whom? Is it true that the colonizer departed, left, or be deported from the colonies? Or is it still living within us in carrying different name, different label? The study concludes that the Middle East is still colonized and was never decolonized. It shows that what happens is that the colonizer tricked and fooled the colonized, and this colonized vacates the center and rush to the margin to enjoy what is called human rights. So let's see what human rights means. Generally, it is defined that human right is a basic right that belongs to everyone, to every person from birth until death. It is said that it is the fruit of the Enlightenment. In Arab world, it is believed that it is a fruit of religion started from Judaism, or you can say Christianity, and also from Islam, and also from any religion that promotes peace and morality. The study is not to trace back the history of human rights, but to show how it is interpreted and used in some contexts. And that is to support my argument. I'll give some examples of what is happening in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and some Arab countries. Uh, because what my paper is assume is that the human right is but a Western political project aims to control the other, and that other can be interpreted according to the context. We can say the Arab countries, we can say the third world, we can say they want to control the East. So from domain to domains, it has some varieties. So by this argument, I am not denying the advantage of human rights, but I am trying to unveil the dark side of human rights. I want to remove the mask of what is hidden behind the term human right. To go further, back to the history of human rights, which became, like this term become very prominent topic after what is called the end of colonization. We can see that this label is being tagged to anything when the colonizer wants to interfere in the interior affairs. So this term began to be seen and tagged whenever the colonizer wants to interfere in any interior affairs of the colonized. Human rights is used by the colonizer to rationalize its interference in the affairs. Say, you can say that in the affairs of the third world, in the affairs of the Middle East countries. So let me, before going to study the relationship between the emergence of human rights and also its relationship with the colonizer and the colonized, and what are the impacts on of human rights on the colonized, and how it helps to enslave the colonized to the colonizer. I'd like first to critically shed light on the deceiving phrase or title that seeps unconsciously to the mind of the colonized. That's to say, the misunderstanding of what is called the end of colonization. Because such a term passes very quickly, in front of us, and we don't, realize what, in fact, what does it mean. So this confusing term was created to convince the colonized that he became free and can resume his normal life independently and pursue his dreams. But in fact, the word end does not necessarily mean the departure. The departure, that is what we say, the departure of the colonizer, but it means the culmination of something. So here we can say the culmination, it means the culmination of colonization, or the last updated version or form of colonization. I think this is the true interpretation of what is called the end of colonization. And that can be seen in what is happening in the Middle East. What we observe here in the Middle East is a continuation of colonization. that can simply be recognized through the direct and indirect intervention in the interior affairs of Arab countries. The direct intervention is very much well known to all, and that is through their military bases that can be seen in almost all Arab countries in the name of what? Protecting their interests. But what we want to focus on here is the indirect intervention. And this kind of intervention, it has many phases, and one of them is what is called human rights. What appears to common people that human right is meant for the sake of them, to liberate them, to grant them the right to live as others and to be treated as others. However, we can also elicit some like wise saying of what Nelson Mandela says: when a man is denied the right to live the life he believes in, he has no choice but to become an outlaw. So here, most of the people, common people, believe that these organizations, they came for them, to help them, to secure them. But if we go to the spirit of these organizations, the spirit of human rights, we'll find that they are working to make the familiar strange. What is used to be familiar to the society becomes strange and might be considered a threat to it. Human rights is but a tool of suppression and exclusion. It excludes some groups, some individuals, taking them to the margin, creates some fraction within the society. It is implemented to make a social confusion that will definitely lead to a social rejection of something, though it was familiar to it or part of it. Let's take an example of transgender, gays, lesbians, some other, issues. These kind of terms that are like now very prominent because the media shed light on it. So they were living peacefully within the society, and we know them, we recognize them. We They are socialized. But now after they focus on them and encourage them to move from the center to the margin. So here the society feels with this threat, and they are not going to take their rights. In fact, they are losing some privilege that the society used to give them, because we used to live with them. And we know that he is transgender, this is a lesbian, this is a gay, and there was no problem. But now after they get fooled, and also the society gets like what dragged to a social confusion, here there is resistance. So let's see how the ideology was implemented by what is called human rights, and how these groups were fooled. So when the society gets confused, they reject anything imposed on them. So this kind of rejection, it is but a lack of recognition of minorities. due to the concealed ideology that peculiarizes and alienates those individuals and minorities. This ideology is designed and imposed by the colonizer to confuse the colonized. To put it differently, the society fails to embrace those individuals and minorities because of the confusing ideology used by the colonizer. So they are dividing the society into many groups, and then they are taking one by one, and then the society will be vacuum. And that is what Bertolt Brecht said. First of all, they came to take the gypsies, and I was happy because they pilfered. Then they came to take the Jews, and I said nothing because they were unpleasant to me. Then they came to take homosexuals, and I was relieved because they were annoying me. Then they came to take the communists, and I said nothing because I was not a communist. One day they came to take me, and there was nobody left to protest. So here is the lesson. One by one, they are splitting society and taking one by one, fooling one by one, and vacuuming the center. So due to the social divisions created by the colonizer, the individuals or minorities rush to the margin to win the promises, the grants, or the offers of the colonizer in the name of human rights. Here it means that the meaning or the understanding of the relationship between the center and the margin here, it appears, it comes since they create a margin. So here we need to know what is the meaning of this relationship. In fact, the relationship here is relational, and this takes us to the theory of dissocier, the sign, signifier, and signified. The meaning of human right is produced through the relations between the center and the margin. This means also that the identity of individuals, the identity of minorities, or the identity of majorities is recognized through another individuals, another minorities, and another majorities. What is then, some people will ask, what is the margin? The margin is a small space that lies and surrounds the center, or it is the edge that appears to the at the border of the center. That small space, which seems reserved for the minorities, the colonized, is meant for defining himself or themselves. It also defines the center, which finds it an opportunity to be recognized through the margin. So when the minorities rush to the margin, they vacate the center, and then the center becomes a vacuum. This gives an excuse to the colonizer to occupy it in the name of imposing human rights. Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Sudan are an example of such a policy. Ian McEwan, the British writer, what he said in his novel called Saturday, during the narrative of the novel, two characters, one English, he was a doctor, and the doctor and one Iraqi citizen, they were talking in a restaurant while having their lunch, and the British doctor told him that, do you think that America is going to liberate you, to give you the freedom? He said, yeah, we are happy that, America is coming to our country and they are, granting us the freedom. And we wanted them to defeat, Saddam and eliminate him. So he said, you are only fooled, and what will happen is that if Saddam used to give you 50 bottles of oil and takes 50, USA is going to take 99 bottles of oil and will give you one. So I said, no, I don't believe that, and now the reality proves that saying. So the same thing in Yemen, in Iraq, Syria, Libya. You can compare how Yemen was and how it is now. How was Iraq and how it is now? How was Syria and how it is now? How was Libya and how it is now? So these countries have been controlled by the Western political actors. In fact, countless human organizations have rushed into these countries in the name of promoting human rights, and also they are assuming they are there to restore security and peace. However, these organizations have been fueling the political conflicts, glowing the social fractions with doubts and hatred. The irony is that the colonizer is the one who diagnoses the dilemma of the colonized. He brings the disease and then suggests the remedy for it. So a human right also creates the margin. It brings us back to the same relationship between the master and his servant or slave. To put it correctly, the colonized is deliberately defined and treated as a minority group, or sometimes symbolizes a backward community that searches for recognition to gain some privilege or rights. There are now some communities, they want to be labeled or tagged as backward, though the word is hurting, but they feel that they'll get some privilege. See the irony how they make people to be. That is why we see some individuals, groups rush to appreciate the Western policy as it is, without examining it or scrutinizing it. In return, what they'll get, the Western policy shows them as victims of either their religion, since religion becomes the handy tool of anyone who wants to justify his or her violence or acts, or victims of their dictators. And we know those dictators, they are but puppets put there by the West, and they are only protecting the Western interest. What appears to us in this is a confusion of belonging. The colonizer becomes confused of, to which part he is belonging. Is it to the margin or to the center? Does the colonized really belongs to the margin or to the center, or is it an attempt to re-centralize himself in the margin, as it cannot recognize the controller of the center, because who is controlling the center is but those organizations, the Western colonizer. But to know more, what they gain, those who run or rush to the margin, what do they gain? At the end, they gain nothing, in fact, but they gain the label only. Look first, even if they move to the other center. If we look deeply to those who moved to the West, thinking that they would be treated as a Westerner and enjoyed the full privileges, and then what they found nothing but confronting discrimination and social resistance. The Western society has been resisting them, and this led to the emergence of what is called the diasporic literature, and which is one theme of this conference. They started writing back, telling to what extent they were fooled and still living in the circumstances of that lie. I think here I have to stop and to give time to discussion and questions, or I'll be happy to get some valuable comments. Thank you.